Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon for those of you in Eastern time, and good morning if you're in another time zone. And we really are excited that you are joining us today. This is our occasional, roughly monthly resilience presentation series hosted by the East Tennessee State University Ballad Health Strong Brain Institute. If you found your way to this presentation via any other means but direct email, and you'd like to be added to our distribution email list, please put your email in the chat, and Lisa will add you to our distribution list so that you'll find out about our different talks. If you saw it by social media, that's fine, because you must be following us, so you found it that way. We're really glad that you're here to join us. And my name is Michelle Mosier, and along with my job as the director of the ETSU Center of Excellence for Children in State Custody, I also serve as the Associate Director of Community Engagement for the Strong Brain Institute. The Strong Brain Institute was founded by a $1 million 5-year gift to ETSU from Ballad Health. The goal of the Strong Brain Institute is to use the science of childhood adversity coupled with mitigation science and resilience science to prevent and mitigate the negative impacts of adverse childhood experiences on children and adults' lives, and to promote awareness and the use of resilience-informed procedures and policies, both at ETSU and throughout the Appalachian Highlands region. The SBI serves as a resource for folks to turn to when they have questions about how to best employ resilience-informed strategies and practices in their workspaces. It's my pleasure to welcome our presenter, Dr. Wallace Dixon, who will be sharing information about a current project with the talk entitled Creating Better Workplaces, a Trauma-Informed Approach. I will introduce Dr. Dixon in a moment, but I wanted to remind you all to use the chat for questions or to share related information that you'd like to share with other participants. The SBI records these presentations, and you can find previous Resilient Series presentations on our website. We'll put the website in the chat. After we talk, we'll share a link to collect your feedback, which should take less than 2 minutes to complete, but helps us to continue to improve our resilient presentation series. So let me turn to introducing our presenter, which is why you're here today. Wallace E. Dixon Jr. is the founding director of the ETSU Ballad Health Strong Brain Institute, where BRAIN is the acronym for Building Resilience Through ACEs-Informed Networking. Dr. Dixon is also a professor of psychology at East Tennessee State University, where he previously served as department head for 21 years. As a developmental psychologist, in infancy science, he has received funding from the National Institutes of Health, the state of Tennessee, Ballad Health Systems, and has authored 3 books and dozens of scientific journals. As an academic administrator, Dr. Dixon has worked to infuse trauma and resilience-informed values into the workplace in a way that recognizes everyone's unique developmental histories and experiences. Dr. Dixon is well-versed in the science of ACEs and the science of communication of ACEs messaging, and is a valued collaborator at ETSU in the Appalachian Highlands region and for statewide projects and partnerships. Welcome, Dr. Dixon, and you can take it away.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to ignore where it says I can admit people, and I'll let other people do that. But do want to remind folks that if you have a question about anything that I say, go ahead and put it in the chat. Some of the questions can be answered by Lisa, who is one of my colleagues in the Better Workplaces Tennessee project. And then if others, they may interrupt me to answer any questions in real time. So let me start out by saying, this is called Better Workplaces Tennessee, a Trauma-Informed Approach Recognition Project. This is funded by the Tennessee Department of Health to the ETSU Ballad Health Strong Brain Institute to develop a recognition program for trauma-informed workplaces. And also, before I forget, this is free for any workplaces in the state of Tennessee, funded by the Tennessee Department of Health. All right. So here's the organization of my talk today. I'm going to start by addressing some elements that I think are often misnomers. I'm going to be talking, and then I'm going to go into talking about some of the core elements of the Better Work. And also I'm going to have to say, this used to be called Trauma-Informed Workplaces, this project, and we've recently changed the name to Better Workplaces Tennessee. So I'm probably going to slip a few times and call it Trauma-Informed Workplaces because I've been saying that word for about 2 years. So just understand that those are the same thing. I'm just not able to remember all the time. Better Workplaces Tennessee. So in the context of the Better Workplaces Tennessee Recognition Program, there are some core elements that I wanted to review with you. One are the guiding values, which for those of you who are familiar with trauma work and familiar with the SAMHSA values, the 6 values, and I'll return to those in a minute, those form the core of our trauma work. And I think probably they underline the core of any trauma work or trauma enterprise. And we'll focus on the key development areas, which is how we've broken down this work into snackable bites so that individual workplaces can focus on one area or the other. We'll talk about the phases of implementation. We have 3 phases of implementation, starting with silver, then moving on to gold, and then moving on to platinum, which is the most advanced. We have a navigator. The navigator, we have about 3 navigators on staff. And all the navigator does is serve as a liaison between the Better Workplaces Tennessee program and individual workplaces that we're working with. And then we'll talk about the levels of recognition and then the application process and getting started. So I think I wanted to go back here and recognize a couple of our partners in this work. Becky Haas, many of you may know Becky. She's a member of the Strong Brain Institute. She, as you know, she goes around gallivanting around the world, giving trauma-informed talks, and also around the United States. And we're very fortunate to have her in our own backyard. So she serves as a consultant on this and a lot of other projects that the Strong Brain Institute undertakes. We work closely with the Appalachian Promise Alliance, which used to be Bristol's Promise. Our marketing and website strategies are handled by the ETSU Research Corporation. And also I want to say that we have copied significantly and proudly from the University of Buffalo School of Social Work Trauma-Informed Organizational Change Manual. So anybody can access this manual. What we've done is we've taken some of the key elements from the manual and we've put it into a different, smaller, more accessible package for made it available for the workplaces in Tennessee. But if you're familiar with that manual, then you'll recognize several of the concepts that we'll be talking about. All right. So the misnomers. First of all, a lot of people, the words trauma and resilience informed don't have a lot of meaning out in the real world. There's a set of us, the people who are in the trauma-informed world who understand these concepts, but once you step outside the bubble of trauma-informed practices, a lot of people don't understand it. And so one of our objectives in serving workplaces in Tennessee is familiarizing folks with the language of trauma-informed and resilience-informed. We use the term TRIPS, or at least I will be using the term TRIPS in this talk, which is an acronym for Trauma and Resilience-Informed Practices. And one of the misnomers is that trauma and resilience-informed practices are only for those with trauma histories, and that's absolutely not true. Once you learn the guiding values, then you'll understand that those are guiding values. Those are good for everybody. They're helpful, and they were developed in the context of people who have had trauma or ACEs or adverse childhood experiences, but really they apply to everybody. In fact, if you're like me and you read all about adverse childhood experiences, on the one hand, and then you read about leadership development on the other hand, they use the same concepts, but they don't use the same terminology. And so to me, that's fascinating. So the things that we're going to be talking about in terms of the principles, the values, Those are discussed at great length in leadership books, but they don't use those same terms. And if you don't believe me, check out the literature yourself, but take my word for it. I don't really want to tell my trauma histories, and I don't really want to learn about anybody else's trauma histories. I just want to do my job. Right. Well, we don't want you to we don't want you to disclose your trauma histories either. We don't want you to have to learn about others' trauma histories. The assumption is that if you do trauma-informed work, that people have to disclose their traumas. No, you don't. We assume everybody has trauma and what we call universal precautions. So we just assume that everybody in a workplace has trauma histories, and we develop the principles in order to help the workplace be more functional, but with the assumption that people have trauma histories. But it doesn't matter if nobody in the workplace has a trauma history, which would be extremely unlikely because about 2/3 of us have at least one trauma experience at some point in our life. So we're going to move forward with doing best practices for dealing with trauma and people with trauma-informed histories, recognizing that those are just really good all-purpose business principles anyway. Being trauma-informed would be wonderful if we could say, finally, I am here, I am trauma-informed, I have arrived, but that's not how it works. Trauma-informed is a journey. It's constantly changing, it's dynamic, it's interactive, we're always learning, and occasionally we forget and we slip, and we might engage in a non-trauma-informed practice. Oops, we are human, we do that, and the beauty about having a trauma-informed orientation is giving people grace when they make mistakes and when they slip, and allowing them to be human and bringing their humanity into the workplace. So there's no destination in trauma-informed, it's just a continual lifelong journey. And a lot of times I've heard in higher ed, particularly with professors, I don't want to be my student's therapist. It's not really about therapy, although there are many therapeutic aspects about being trauma-informed. One aspect about being trauma-informed is knowing about the people that you're working with, understanding their stories. And understanding their stories, just listening to the story is has a huge impact on the people that you're working with. You don't have to fix anybody or do therapy with anybody, but just listening to someone's story itself can be therapeutic. If nothing else, it shows that you've been heard, or it shows that they've been heard. Okay, so in developing this program, I wanted to make sure that it was based on the KISS model, and some of you who are old enough may remember KISS had a different acronym, which was not very trauma-informed. So I'm going to use the Keep It Super Simple version of the KISS model. But there are many other models out there which are very complicated and difficult to understand and proprietary. There are some trauma-informed practices that you can purchase. There are for-profit companies out there who do this. There are nonprofit companies out there that do this for a fee. You can do it yourself. You don't need to pay money for it, but there is some value in hiring somebody to come in and making sure that you're on the right track. In the case of our project, Better Workplaces Tennessee, we don't charge a fee. We're using very publicly accessible materials, and it's not proprietary. So theoretically, any of you could do this. You could do exactly what we've outlined to do. The only difference is you wouldn't get the recognition, and a lot of workplaces want to have the recognition of being a trauma-informed workplace. And it's also, for those of you outside of academia, you may not understand the concept of academic accreditation, but I was an accreditor, and in the university setting, we work with accreditors all the time. And for most accreditors, there's a set of rules that are outlined that the organization that wants to be accredited has to follow. But they're allowed to have the flexibility in following those rules according to their unique cultures. And in that case, what an accreditor does is they just go in and check to see if an organization, or in the case of higher education, if a university, or in my case, a department of psychology, if they're following, are you doing what you need to do to be consistent with the values of the accrediting body, and are you doing what you say you do? And the idea here is we want to have as minimal contact with workplaces as possible, because the workplace is going to be the best expert on what's going to work in the workplace, not us, not our team, not our navigators. So we know what the principles are, and we think those principles are universal and can be applied everywhere. But we don't know how an individual workplace is going to apply it. So we just want to say, here's the principles, here's where we think you should do it. And if you need help, we'll give you some feedback on it. But we're not going to tell you what to do. We're not really even going to evaluate what you put together as good or bad, because we want you to do it according to your guidelines and principles. So here are the 6 guiding values. These were extracted from SAMHSA. We've taken some liberties with the terminology, and I'll talk more about these in a second. But safety, psychological, relatively new in the world of safety is psychological safety. That's gotten a lot of pickup in the public in the last 5 years or so, largely probably because of a book published by Amy Edmondson on the Fearless Organization. Check that book out. It's about how to promote organizations that create safety, psychological safety. Trust and transparency, number 2. Number 3, collaboration. 4, empowerment of individuals. 5, peer support. And 6, social and historical impact. So just reviewing these in turn, I mean, I think psychological safety, we've attended to that. We have organizations which monitor that, like the Occupational Safety and Health, is it Safety and Health Administration, OSHA? We have that. So we can make sure that you know, the idea is that we can make sure that you don't, your office isn't filled with black mold, or that rats aren't running around all over the place, or that the parking lots are well lit so you won't get robbed going to your car. Physical safety has been the center of a lot of our attention for many, many years. Psychological safety is kind of what the added value that we're doing, and the trauma work is generally doing, creating psychological safety in the workplace. And basically, we could kind of define it as being able to bring your whole self into the workplace. You don't have to hide part of yourself at home. If you have an opinion in the workplace, we would want you to share it, and without the fear of being criticized or attacked or shamed. Putting those things out on the street corner, we're not using those anymore. And we want you to create a workplace where everyone recognizes the value of psychological safety. Trust and transparency, that's probably one of the biggest problems in workplaces. Is A, you said something was going to happen and it didn't, so I don't trust you. And B, we have no idea why you're making these decisions. You're not sharing that with us. It's not transparent. So from our point of view, it's this mystery. It's a magic box where everybody's making these decisions. Then I don't feel like I belong to this organization. But I will do what I told because I need a paycheck. I'm just not committed to the organization. So we want to promote the value of trust and transparency in the workplace. Collaboration, asking employees what they think, have an opinion. Some of you, if you work at ETSU, you may be aware that we have something called a public comment period for new policies. That I established that actually many years ago as a result of my service on an accrediting body. When accrediting bodies make changes nationally, they'll put something up for public comment, and then the public can get feedback on that. And I had a problem with the way ETSU put forth some policies. They would generate policies and they put them into effect, and it would be obvious that they wouldn't work. And then they could have, and then they implement it anyway, it doesn't work, and then they have to change everything. It's like if you would have just asked us as employees how this would work, you would have found out our feelings of it early on, and maybe you would have, revised the policy or changed how you're going to roll it out. So collaborating with the end users is so important in any policy dissemination. But you have to have an attitude sort of accepting feedback from people in the workplace. And then empowering individuals, recognizing individuals. Every individual has their own story. They have a life. I think this is probably largely true. It's certainly true for me. We were raised with an expectation that people will do their job when they come into the work. And then the job is the thing that you have to do. And the job then makes the individual basically an object. You're an object, you have to do the job. We fail to recognize that nobody is an object. People Everybody in their life at some point has some hot mess that they're managing with. And so there's no such thing as an object coming into the workplace to do a job. There's humans coming into the workplace to do the job. And humans bring with them whatever hot mess they're working on at that moment. And as the supervisor or the boss or the owner or whatever, need to recognize that people are going to do, you start with the assumption people are trying to do their best. You don't start with the assumption that people are trying to rip you off or trying to get through with as little as possible. But also recognizing that when people have a problem in their life, sick parent, sick child, any number of things that might interfere with their ability to function normally. Maybe they ran out of gas. Those are real things that happen to people. And instead of treating people like objects who are failing to live up to their expectation, you recognize that people are humans and give them a little slack so that they can be better in the workplace when they next get back into the workplace. And also, each of us has our own histories. We're different. We bring with us identity differences, experiential differences into the workplace, and we don't always understand all of the cultures or all of the other identities that we're working with. So instead of assuming an egocentric point of view that our individual identity is the best or the centered one or ought to be foremost, we start recognizing, no, everybody's got identities that they're bringing in, and we should try to learn about those to the extent that we can. We don't assume that people need to come to us. We should expend a little effort in trying to learn about other, and so asking questions, being curious about other people's identities and values and viewpoints, and then also celebrating those differences. It really is a good thing when people disagree with you. What I found, and maybe you found this too, when you generate products that have a team putting it together, other team members generate elements of that product that you never saw or would have thought about. And they also identify problems with your own thinking. You don't get that if you're doing the only thinking. And so the best way to produce products is to welcome everybody with differences and to celebrate those differences, especially when a workplace is producing some sort of product. All right, so here's the key development areas. And so we talked about the 6 values, and those 6 values then become implemented in the workplace according to these key development areas. And we'll focus in Better Workplaces Tennessee, we focus on 7 of these key development areas. In the original manual, I believe there were 9 of them. We cut out a couple of those because they were focused more on human service agencies. And our idea is that not everybody's going to be, like a human service agency. So we cut it down to the ones that we think are most relevant. So leading and communicating, it starts with leadership buy-in. When people apply to become a better, a trauma-informed workplace, in our program, the boss, the CEO, the owner, whoever's in charge is the one who has to fill out the application. They can't delegate it to some other, subordinate to fill it out. The boss has to fill it out, and that's a requirement. Also, when you hire and interview, you want to infuse the guiding values in the hiring practices. Training, it's not a one and done. So early on, employees, workers are gonna get training on trauma-informed practices and adverse childhood experiences, stress, and why those things impact performance in the workplace. But other things too that may be going on right now. There's all this. There's a lot of war going on in the world, and it's pretty stressful if you take a minute and watch the news. And people, especially supreme empaths who feel everybody else's emotions, may need some space in the workplace to manage, all the stress and all the death from the wars going around the world. And so there might be training elements embedded in the workplace to help people work through that. Again, people aren't objects. People need to process. People have emotions. And we need to recognize that and provide some ways for people to gain access to emotion regulation skills, for example. Addressing the impact of historical and ongoing trauma among employees. Like I said earlier, we don't need to ask people about their trauma experiences, but if we assume that they have trauma experiences, then we can assume that they have things that are going on in their life that are affecting their ability to function well in the workplace. And also people, because they have such a huge brain and such an ability to imitate others and to understand others. They can get burned out by just watching somebody else go through trauma or somebody else have a negative experience. And so that's something like secondary traumatic stress. Or if you spend your life dealing with people who are going through stress, you can get burned out on that. And so depending on what you're doing in the workplace, not all workers in every workplace may experience compassion fatigue working with members of the public who've had trauma or had negative experiences. But some do. And so, we want to recognize that people can just get burnout on their job. And instead of punishing them or putting them on some sort of, or reprimanding them or on some sort of professional development thing, recognize that it might just be the opposite. We might just need to give people a little space. I remember when I first started as a chair, we looked at people's teaching ability in all the faculty's teaching ability in my department. And some of our faculty were really strong teachers, but there were some faculty who were at the bottom. And of course, in any distribution, some people are going to be at the bottom. One approach to that would be, you need to fix your teaching. You need to get better. Another approach might be, let's assume you're trying the best that you can and you're still at the bottom. Well, what resources can I give you to help you be better? Like, I don't start with the assumption I'm going to punish you because you're not as good as everybody else. I'm going to start with the assumption that you need greater investment because maybe you don't have the skills as everybody else. So I'm actually going to give you more resources because you need it, emphasizing the element of equity rather than equality in that particular case. Establishing a safe environment, that's one of the key development areas. That's more of the physical and psychological impact. I remember going at the Precision Tune, which is right by ETSU campus where they do oil changes, and went in the bathroom once when I was getting my oil change, and there was a classic pinup of a semi-nude woman calendar in the restroom. And, that can be traumatizing for people. It's not maybe something you want to put in a restroom for everybody to see, but little things that you don't think about. And maybe, if you were raised with semi-clad nude calendar women in your environment, you don't even notice that there's something astray. If you're open to feedback from other members of the workplace, then maybe they can tell you, and you're open to the feedback from what they're providing. And so then you've gotten the input, and then you can think about, oh, maybe we need to take that down. Maybe we can put something else up there that is more attractive to everybody. The biggest one is the reviewing policies and procedures. Every organization that has policies and procedures is expected to go through and review their policies and procedures. This would be a really heavy lift for a large organization like ETSU or Toyota or Eastman or Ballad. Maybe smaller lift for smaller organizations like human service agencies. Maybe you have 3 or 4 or 5 employees. Maybe that would be a lot easier to go through than the larger organizations. And then checking back. Once you implement a change, I will tell you that when ETSU implements policy change, they assume, almost as a matter of fact, that it's going to make things better. Okay, great. I mean, that's why we want to do new policies, is we want to make things better. Well, then you got to look to see if it actually did make things better. You got to check on it. So there's an element of one of the key development areas is evaluating progress and monitoring progress. And again, if you're in charge of doing the implementation of policy changes, you want feedback from the workplace so that people can give you guidance about how it's working, and you need to be open for that feedback. All right, so we reviewed the 6 guiding values and then the 7 key development areas, and now we're talking about the levels of implementation. So this is a phased in thing. You can't be recognized, trauma recognized immediately in our program. You have to do work over time to be recognized. And we have 3 levels of recognition that reflect how long, there's a time element, how long the workplace has been doing this work. And so we have pre-implementation phase, the implementation phase, and the sustainability phase. In pre-implementation, that's, I think, the lightest lift, probably, maybe the second lightest lift compared to sustainability. But in pre-implementation, basically, the goal here is to generate a strategic synergy plan put together by a strategic synergy team. And that takes some time. You have to spend some time identifying who's going to be on the team. We want people on a team who are going to be representing all the layers, all the sectors within the workplace. So you might have leaders, you might have custodians, you might have salespeople, you might, in a dealership, you might have a car dealership, you might have mechanics. The idea is to get a broad representation of people who are going to be committed to this work to serve on the team. And the head, we require, during at least this first phase, the head of the organization to be on the strategic synergy team. The leader of the organization has to be knowledgeable about what people are thinking about, and their involvement is going to be implicit endorsement of moving in that direction. So it's really important that the head is on the strategic synergy team early on. We suggest in the area of, so this is the first number one, the leading and communicating in the pre-implementation phase. We suggest that one obvious and easy way that an organization could embed a trauma-informed approach is to revisit their vision, mission, and strategic plan to see if anything could be tweaked to better represent that. But that's not necessary. Like I said, it's up to the organization to make the decision about how they want to implement it. But one possibility would be to add it explicitly in their public materials. We want leadership to communicate in trauma-informed ways, through email exchanges, through newsletters, with how supervision happens. And that needs to be extremely intentional. If you're an organization that has 10 supervisors, and you want to implement it through supervision, you want to implement trauma-informed practices through supervision, then it's important that all the supervisors know that you expect that, and they know how to do that. And so that might require additional training for those supervisors to embed that in their supervision approaches. Hiring or orienting. When you start doing this, everybody in your organization already doesn't necessarily have a trauma-informed orientation. And it's kind of a difficult lift to expect everybody all of a sudden to change their attitude about the world. Maybe some are really bitter about the world and they don't want to do this trauma work, or they're curmudgeons like me and they're resistant and like, this is another fad and we're going to get past this and I'm going to roll my eyes if you talk about this. So it's really important to keep in mind that if you want a major cultural shift in your organization, one way to help move that along is start hiring new people that have that orientation. And that means having advertising jobs that expect that in the ad, and asking trauma-informed questions when you conduct interviews. And hopefully, eventually, you can have a trauma-informed, physically safe, and maybe psychologically, physically safe area that when you give people tours of the workplace, they can see the trauma values in action. So physical safety, lighting, security, accessibility, private spaces, and decor. Some organizations may not have a lot of money to upgrade the physical facilities that they have, but there are smaller things that you can do. Like you can paint the walls, for example. Use nicer, more recent trauma-informed colors. And if you're interested in learning about trauma-informed colors, I learned about those, and those often are described as nature colors. So sort of greens and browns and blues, painting the spaces in those colors can help liven those spaces, also keeping it cleaner. And then, of course, obvious things like fixing locks that don't work, having lighted workplaces, but also lighted parking lots. And those are the kinds of things that you can do at relatively low cost. Psychological safety, though, that requires a little more learning and practice. And there's a great book by Timothy Clark called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. If you listen to books on Audible, it's about a 5-hour listen. It's a pretty good book. This is a person who was trained as a industrial organizational, I don't know if he was a psychologist proper, but he was interested in organizations. And he got his PhD in organizational behavior, but works in the workplace. He works for big businesses in the nation. So he wrote this book, and he talks about the 4 stages of safety, psychological safety. And I won't go through all of these, but the last one, challenger safety, that's the toughest one. Challenger safety is when you feel comfortable enough to challenge, the received wisdom of the rest of the organization or the boss or a committee. You just say, I don't think that's going to work because of X, Y, and Z. And when you have challenger safety, you're comfortable saying those kinds of things, and the rest of the workplace is comfortable for you to say them. In fact, expect you to say them, because that's part of your job, is to challenge. They hired you for your brain, presumably, and they want to leverage that brain in order to improve what they're doing. And so challenger safety is the ultimate goal of psychological safety. And then reviewing the policies and procedures. This is the big lift. At this point in the pre-implementation phase, we're not asking an organization to review all of their policies and procedures and change them. All we're doing is asking an organization to go through their policies and procedures and identify those that best exemplify a trauma-informed approach. Okay, so that's stage 1. And once you do that, you've got a strategic synergy team. You put together a strategic synergy plan. You use some brief environmental scans to check out the physical safety of your environment. You do an initial scan of your policies and procedures, and you outline those policies and procedures that are strongly aligned with the trauma-informed approach. Then you get the recognition of silver. And so we don't really know. We don't have any recognized people yet. We just kind of opened our shop a few months ago. We have about 3 or 4 organizations going through the process. Nobody has completed the pre-implementation phase yet. But if you could dedicate 100% of your time to doing this, I think that you could probably get the silver recognition in a few weeks or months. Pretty quick. That's pretty quickly. And you could be recognized within, so we put down, up to 6 months. We don't really know how long it's going to be, but we think that part can be done pretty quickly. The next phase, the implementation phase, is when you start doing the heavy work. That's when you start doing the program review, the policy reviews, policies and procedures. You start hiring practices that promote trauma-informed policies, and you try to hire trauma-informed people. And we require in this recognition program that an organization be doing the work. They be recognized at the silver level for 1 year before they'll be eligible for gold. That's really important, because that cuts out the fad element. That people are waiting it out for the fad to pass. I don't think it's a fad. I think that it's so evidence-based. People who follow trauma-informed approaches are extremely productive, promotes productivity in the workplace, happiness, like all the good stuff, lowered burnout. Using trauma-informed practices works. I don't think that people are going to think that this is a fad, but because we also know that there can be turnover within an organization, we also know that with that turnover goes good ideas, potentially. And so we want an organization to do this work for a year before they get recognized at the silver level. But again, it goes back to the same key development areas: leading and communicating, hiring and orientation, and this is when you can start requiring people. Maybe earlier you didn't want to require people to have a trauma-informed approach, but at this point you can require people, because you're hiring new people under these conditions and guidelines that you want people to be trauma-informed. So you can advertise for trauma-informed people, or you can hire people that are interested in being trauma-informed. So they don't have to have it coming in, although you can require that. You can require them to come in and then get the learning. So that might be the first onboarding that you do, is do trauma training with all new employees for the next X number of weeks or days or whatever you decide in your organization. That's appropriate. Training the workforce. So early on in the first phase, in the pre-implementation phase, we provided training about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. We provided training about the trauma, we call them pillars internally, the values. We train them on the values. we train the strategic synergy team on those values. We don't actually train the rest of the workplace until the workplace receives the silver recognition. Once they receive the silver recognition, then we roll out the training widely throughout the rest of the workplace. And then the idea is that with opt-in elements, like we're not going to require anybody to do this training if that's our view. An organization might have a different approach, but our view is nobody should be forced to do this if they don't want to do it. If there's one way to get people to resist you, it's to force them to do something. So we want people to opt in. We want people to see the value of a trauma approach. And once they see the value, they're going to want to do this and they're going to want to get trained. So then we go through with the whole organization being trained after that initial phase. And we expect the workplace to provide the appropriate resources. We also know that if you ask people to do something on top of their already heavy workload, they're not going to like it. And so we ask workplaces to come up with an approach such that doing the trauma work, doing the trauma training or being trauma informed, that replaces some other element that was in their daily work responsibilities. So for example, if somebody, let's suppose an organization wants to train folks and it takes 2 hours, we think that they should do that on their work time and not have to do it on their weekends or in the evenings. That should be something they do as part of their job. All right. And then at that point, we kind of dissolve the strategic synergy team and we create a longer-term champion team. In the process of rolling out trauma practices, trauma-informed practices, and elements related to it, what you can find is that there are going to be people who are champions of this work. They're going to get it. They're going to buy into the evidence-based, evidence knowledge base that supports the effectiveness of this work. And over time, it's going to be important to have a team that attracts people that have a lot of social capital in the workplace. These could be people like me, who most people regard as curmudgeons. And if a curmudgeon or a skeptic believes in something, then it's like, oh, wow, even that person believes in it. Or socially popular people who have a lot of social sway in an organization. You want to find out who your champions are going to be, and then you leverage your champions in the workplace. Ultimately, these champion team members may be eventually good future trainers. After we train the initial team ourselves in the Trauma-Informed Workplace Project, we want the organization to be able to train their own folks moving forward. And the best trainers are going to be those champions. Because the champions have the attitude, skeptical attitude, that they can say, see, even I believe in this stuff. And if I believe it, then I'm good. I'm going to be a good person that you can trust. All right, I'm looking at the time, being mindful of time. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. In implementation, the biggest, heaviest lift is the reviewing policies and procedures. I know, for example, at ETSU, we spent about 10 years, and I don't know why that just did that. Okay, sorry. We did about 10 years when we switched, ETSU switched from being governed by the Tennessee Board of Regents to be governed by its own Board of Trustees. We had to go through and look at all of our policies and basically change the policies from being supervised by the Board of Trustees, being supervised by the Board of Regents to being formed by the Board of Trustees. So that was, I believe there are a couple of people assigned to do this full time for years. And in the course of doing that, they also were looking at all the other policies that maybe have been, obsolete for years. They no longer apply for whatever reason. And so this can be a pretty heavy lift. And so, but we want an organization to go through their policies and to see if those policies can be changed in ways that are more trauma informed. Particularly policies around HR. I think in HR, there's a lot of policy. And if there's anybody from HR, don't mean to I single you out, but HR is a place that hires you and fires you. So there's a lot of threat around HR offices. Sometimes organizations have unwritten rules and policies, and to the extent possible, they should be written down. They should be codified so that everybody knows what they are, and they don't get in trouble for breaking the rule because nobody told them that it was a rule or whatever. And then in the last phase is the sustainability phase, which after you've completed the implementation phase, you have the champion team, you've done the training of the workplace. People understand what the goals of the organization are. There's good communication strategies between administration, between leadership and the workers. Everything is good. Then you then enter into the third stage, which is the platinum stage. And at that point, you're not doing anything new. You're just monitoring what you've already did and making sure it's still working for you. And then you might tweak things, you might remove things. Something might have seemed like a good idea early on. Maybe you don't need it anymore because it's accomplished its objectives. What does our navigator do? Well, our navigator, we have about 3 navigators, and a navigator is the point person assigned to a workplace whose job it is to liaise between the Strong Brain Institute with the workplace. And so they may help the head of the organization complete the application. They will, as I mentioned earlier, you might have read in the notes earlier, we collect data from the organization about workplace satisfaction. The navigators, the person, we get the data on workplace satisfaction. We produce an analysis and summary about where issues are in the workplace that they might want to consider, but that happens through the liaison of the navigator. The navigator takes our statistical analysis, takes it back to the workplace and meets with the workplace to share with them what their own employees reported on the when we collected the data from them. All right. I already mentioned this. There's silver, gold, and platinum. Silver is when once you complete pre-implementation, we imagine it could be done as quickly as 6 months. Maybe it can be done quicker. Once you complete the pre-implementation phase, establishing the strategic synergy team, establishing the strategic synergy plan, you enter gold. Then you start reviewing the policies, implementing the policies, change your hiring practice, improve upon your communication practices within the organization. You do that for 1 year, and then you're platinum. And then platinum, you do that for 1 year. Upon completion of 1 year of the sustainability phase, then you're recognized as platinum. Sorry for saying that wrong. So if you want to apply, and this is for Tennessee organizations, but again, this can happen in any state with anybody who puts together these resources. The application is completed by the head of the organization. Usually that's with the assistance of our navigator. The head of the organization and HR manager or equivalent, we ask to serve on a strategic synergy team and to collect other key collaborators in the organization. And then I guess this is a piece I didn't say didn't rely on as much before, but the head of the organization has to agree to let us see their employee data. I mean, that's pretty, if you're an employee, if you're the head of an organization, you may not want other people to see what your employees are saying about you. And I get that, that's very threatening. But if we're going to help an organization, we have to see how their employees are responding to the surveys. And then once we see how they're responding to the surveys, we can interpret trends or whatever. We have a whole team of people. I guess we call ourselves evaluators, but most of us in that space are PhDs in statistical analysis and that sort of stuff. We can give feedback and guidance to the head of the organization. So they have to agree to let us see it. At the same time, they have to recognize that they're going to have to change some of what they're doing, which may include having to spend more money for space improvements or giving employees some time, not time off, but time that can be redirected to do this work, because this work does take time, and employees are going to, and the organization needs to recognize the value of the time committed. And they can do that by doing formal work reassignments in that process. Okay, and that is it. No, it's not it. Sorry, one last thing. Here is this QR code will take you to our website where you can enter your name and email information, where if you're interested in learning more, You can go there or click on the website link to the left, which you can't click on because it's not active in on your screen. So go to the QR code, that'll take you to your website, fill out the I need more information form, and then we'll get back to you.
Lisa did put the Better Workplaces
Okay.
email in the chat.
So we are a little picky of who we're going to do. We're not doing just anybody who comes to us. We're going to look at the application and see if it's something that we can do. You know, early on when we first started, we wouldn't have been interested in taking on a major organization like Eastman or Toyota or Ballad, because we need to figure out how to do this. Like, we're people who are doing another job. We got this contract with the state to develop this project, and so we're developing this project and we're doing it, but we're learning as we go along, and we didn't want to engage in something that was going to be too heavy of a lift for us. We also granted priority to warm leads, and by warm leads, these are people that we know in organizations throughout the state who are probably going to automatically value a trauma-informed workplace, usually human service agencies. So we approached a number of human service agencies and we said, hey, check this out. You might be interested in this. So we did that, and they responded if they wanted to, and now we're opening up more broadly. Once an organization is enrolled, accepted, then Lisa or one of the other navigators will work with the organization to orient them to everything that I just shared with you, including the 6 guiding values, the 7 key development areas, and the 3 levels of recognition. Once they're admitted, also the organizational head and the key members of the workplace, which are usually going to be on the strategic synergy team, take the pre-test survey, and we administer the 2 training videos. So we have training videos. Becky Haas produced one of the training videos, and Melissa Roberts from Appalachian Promise Alliance produce the other video. And so that's about an hour and a half of video training for the organizational head and the key members. So they do that training. And then once they complete that training, then we get back with the organization. We meet with them. We talk about how they're thinking about rolling out the project. Now that's it. I know that's a lot, and I went through very quickly, a lot faster than I wanted to there at the end, but thought I'd stop there and see if anybody has any questions or comments.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, my name is Cassie Van Sant, and I was just gonna say that I really appreciate it seems like intentionality that you really took into this project, because it seems like, I mean, the workplaces and the organizations that we all work in were not really built with trauma-informed practices in mind. And so I just really appreciate kind of like the acknowledgement and then restructuring of the organization. It seems like y'all spent a lot of time on that. So thank you. It's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Holly, this is Debbie Bird. You know, I'm a fan already, and I wondered if it would be possible to get like a handout of your slide presentation. I took notes, but this is a great summary of how to get started.
Yes, we will have this. We have our own YouTube channel, and so this recording will be available on our YouTube channel as well. So if you wanted someone in your unit to, to see the presentation, that would be fine. Yeah, I don't think there's any reason why I couldn't share the slides as well. I'll count on Lisa to do that for me.
Well, could you like make the PDF, and I think we were talking with Ben about maybe putting the PDF near the recording so that they're together if we send people there. There's a question in the chat right now.
So Mary Beardsley was talking about work for a state Medicaid agency in Arizona. I wanted to implement a TIC workplace for several years. I've not been able to tackle it yet, but what we did prior to COVID was implement a therapy dog program to address secondary trauma for quality staff and customer resolution staff. Oh, I can't imagine customer resolution staff. I would hate to have me as a customer. And it was very successful. Right. I mean, yes. So just attending to employee needs, providing something that creates a safe space for them to move away from whatever stress they're having to, in this case, connect with a puppy seems very effective as a strategy.
Sophia has her hand up.
Okay. Yeah.
Sophia,
go
do you want to
ahead.
unmute?
Go ahead, Sophia.
There was another question. Oh, go ahead, Sophia.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Sophia Jones. I am from the New Jersey Department of Children and Families, the Office of Resilience. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I heard you say that the training is not mandatory and individuals are given the option to opt out. Is that correct?
So our idea is consistent with the trauma-informed approach that if a workplace decides to go in this direction, they don't mandate their employees to do it without their consent or permission, because we know that the best way to get people to resist something is to tell them to do something they don't want to do. And there's a lot of people who are skeptical about this whole trauma-informed world. So yeah, that's correct. I did say that. Now, whether or not it's feasible, it may not always be feasible in every organization, but at least I think an organization should give some thought to bringing people along slowly, compassionately, and with their own authority, autonomy.
And I would add
Sure.
another way is incentivizing versus like demanding, like so that you get something extra if you do the training. When you have a choice, there may be other ways to increase folks doing it though. I saw another question about whether this was in other states, and now I can't see it.
So Paula asked, well, Melissa Webb asked, how do you get a pet trained as a therapy dog? Well, yeah, I'll let other people answer that question. Paula asked, I'm assuming this program would be applied to a university as a whole and not an individual unit within the university. Actually, Paula, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I don't think it could ever happen as a whole university. I think it would have to happen. I mean, I know why you would say that, because some of the university policies, well, all the university policies apply to everybody, and a small unit can't change the policies of the whole university. That's true. But there are ways that a smaller unit can interpret some policies, or maybe they can get permission to deviate from a policy that the university has in a way that's, that's safe. Or also the other problem is if the policy is a really dumb one, and when the unit tries to go forward, they recognize that the policy is dumb, and they can go back to the university and say, this, you need to fix this policy. It's really hostile to employees or whatever. But I think I've been thinking that this should start at least probably at like a department level. And I'm just talking about an academic institution. I'm not talking about all of them, but there are, like in state government, there's a lot of smaller units that are under bigger units. So I think smaller, and hospitals also, I think smaller units can do a lot of this work, and I'll be curious to see how far they can get. Like maybe they can get really far without the policy piece, or they could have some sub policies that work for their unit. But I don't think it could work at a university level. I think it would have to work. And you may be aware, Paul, also that we've been working with, historically, we've worked with our Gatton College of Pharmacy, and we've worked with the Clemmer College of Education as units separate off from the whole university. So I would think that my expectation would be, let's try it at the unit level first and see how that works. And then, but also it's evidence-based. Like once we find out how it works or doesn't work, we can collect that data and find out best practices, what worked and what didn't, and then wrap that up into our next effort to implement it in some other unit. Barbara said, do you work with organizations in other states to help them develop a tiered certification process? No, not that we can't, we just haven't. And just a reminder, this is funded by the Tennessee Department of Health Office of Injury Prevention. And so that's how we're able to offer it at no charge to Tennessee workplaces. Mary, looks like you have your hand up.
I do, thank you. I put my personal email information in, if anybody's interested in reaching out to me to find out more about, what it takes to do therapy dog training and implement a program and get certification for therapy dog information. So if you would just please do me a favor, so I don't think your email is junk, please let me know in the subject line that it's, therapy dog questions. There's so much information out there, and I wrote the policy that we utilize here at Access, and it's proprietary as far as I know, but I'm certainly happy to share information about how to set up something like that. It's just so valuable, and I can't say enough wonderful things about the human animal bond. So I'll stop now because I know we're past time. Thank you all very much. This was great.
Thank you. Well, I will hand it back to Michelle, I guess. Thank you all for attending. I appreciate your time. And if you have any thoughts you want to share with me by email, feel free to do that. I'd be interested in what you have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Lisa, maybe you can put one more time the feedback. We really appreciate you just kind of giving us your thoughts and your ideas. And we build this resilience series based on who we know, ideas we think folks would be interested in. So we really want to hear your ideas, or if you're someone who wants to share some great resilience informed stuff, we would love to talk with you about how to showcase your work. So please let us know. And thank you, Wally, and watch your emails for Lisa is helping us try to get every month a resilience presentation. So we'll be sending out information about our January talk shortly. So thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.